Let's get right into it. Number 10. In 1900, King Umberto I of Italy sat down for dinner at a small restaurant and struck up a conversation with the owner, who happened to look almost exactly like him. Same face, same build, same birthday, same birth year, same hometown. Even the names lined up almost perfectly. As the two men talked, the king learned the restaurant owner had opened his business on the same day Umberto was crowned king, and that the man had also once been in the military, coincidentally enlisting the same year Umberto joined as well. It kept going, detail after detail stacking up like the universe was running out of new material. Later that same day, Umberto received grim news. His double had been accidentally shot and killed. Hours later, Umberto himself was assassinated by an anarchist while greeting a crowd. Two men, one face, one birthday, one death separated by a matter of hours. It's the kind of story that sounds invented specifically for a campfire, except newspapers at the time reported it as straightforward fact. Somewhere in Italian history, a coincidence walked right up to a king, shook his hand, and then quietly predicted the exact day he'd die. Number 9. In 1898, a struggling novelist named Morgan Robertson wrote a story about a massive, supposedly unsinkable ocean liner called the Titan, which sinks in the North Atlantic after striking an iceberg on an April night. 14 years passed. Then a real ship, roughly the same size, carrying roughly the same number of passengers, moving at a similar speed, hit an iceberg on the starboard side, in April, in almost the exact same stretch of ocean Robertson had described. That ship was the Titanic. The overlaps run deep enough to feel engineered. Both ships were described as nearly the same size, both had triple-screw propellers, both could carry about 3,000 people, and both had too few lifeboats. Go-to tutors Robertson himself insisted, for the rest of his life, that this was simply informed guesswork based on shipbuilding trends of the era, not any kind of premonition. Compare it to predicting a specific car crash years in advance, down to the make, model, and intersection. Whether it was genuine foresight or an extremely educated guess, one thing stayed true either way. Reality apparently read Robertson's manuscript for notes. Number 8. In 1884, a British yacht called the Mignonette sank in the South Atlantic, leaving 4 survivors stranded on a lifeboat with no food and dwindling hope of rescue. As days passed without help arriving, the crew made a horrifying decision, killing and eating the weakest among them to survive. That crew member's name was Richard Parker. Decades earlier, Edgar Allan Poe had written a novel describing an almost identical scenario. Shipwrecked survivors resorting to cannibalism, and the unlucky victim they chose was also named Richard Parker. Poe's fictional account predates the real disaster by roughly 46 years. It's the difference between an author guessing a general outcome and an author apparently naming a real future victim decades before that person existed. Compare it to a novelist inventing a stranger's full name today, only for that exact stranger to end up in tomorrow's headlines. Nobody has a clean explanation for this one. It just sits there, uncomfortably specific, waiting for someone to make sense of it. Number 7. Mark Twain was born in 1835, the same year Halley's Comet streaked across the sky, an event that only happens roughly once every 75 years. Twain later joked that he'd arrived with the comet, and expected to leave with it too, treating the idea almost like a private joke about his own mortality. In 1910, the comet returned to the inner solar system exactly on schedule, visible from Earth once again. Twain died the very next day after its closest approach. Astronomers didn't design that timing. Nobody nudged a comet's orbit to match a novelist's biography. It's simply 2 independent timelines, one astronomical, one human, that happen to bookend each other with almost theatrical precision. Compare it to being born the same year a specific eclipse occurs, then dying the day after the next one arrives on schedule 75 years later. Twain treated the whole thing as a punchline while he was alive. History apparently decided to deliver on it anyway, right on cue, like the universe had been quietly setting up the ending the entire time. Number 6. In 1974, a hijacked commercial airliner was forced to make an emergency landing, and among the shaken passengers walking off the plane was a stuntman named Alan Purwin. That's not the coincidence. Purwin went on to survive multiple other aviation-related close calls over the following decades, building a career flying and coordinating stunts in the film industry, an environment built almost entirely around calculated risk. In 2015, Purwin died in a helicopter crash while working on a movie set in Colombia. What makes this one land differently isn't a single dramatic overlap. It's the accumulation, a life spent repeatedly walking right up to aviation disaster and stepping away unharmed until the pattern simply ran out. Compare it to a stunt driver who survives crash after crash for decades, only to be sidelined by an ordinary fender bender. Statistically, none of it should mean anything. Emotionally, it reads like a story arc no screenwriter would dare pitch, because it would sound far too neat to be believed. Number 5. In 1975, a British man named John Woods was riding a moped through Bermuda when he was struck and killed by a taxi. That alone would be an ordinary, tragic accident. What makes it strange is what happened 1 year earlier on the same road to his brother. Same street, same moped, same taxi, driven by the same driver, carrying the same passenger. 2 brothers killed 12 months apart by the exact same vehicle and driver, on the exact same stretch of road. No sabotage, no pattern anyone could act on in advance. Just an overlapping set of coordinates in time and space that repeated itself with unsettling precision. Compare it to lightning striking the same exact spot in a parking lot 2 years in a row, hitting 2 different people who happened to be related. Bermuda's roads didn't change, the driver didn't change. Only the version of the family riding past that particular curve changed, and even that somehow wasn't enough to break the pattern. Number 4. Charles Dickens wrote a supernatural short story in which a character avoids being murdered because a vivid dream warned him about the exact circumstances beforehand. Roughly 2 decades later, a Welsh mining engineer named Edward Williams claimed to have experienced almost the identical scenario, dreaming a warning that supposedly redirected his travel plans and kept him away from a location where he otherwise would have died. Whether every detail of Williams's account holds up to modern scrutiny is genuinely debated among historians, and skepticism here is fair. What's not in dispute is that Dickens's fictional premise and the later real-world claim followed strikingly similar shapes: dream, warning, altered decision, survival. It's the literary equivalent of writing a very specific weather forecast, then having someone claim the exact same storm happened to them personally. Fiction doesn't usually rehearse reality this precisely. Occasionally, though, it seems to run the drill anyway, just to see if anyone downstream is paying attention. Number 3. Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy share a set of verified overlaps specific enough to make historians pause, even after the exaggerated internet myths get filtered out. Both presidents were elected exactly 100 years apart, Lincoln in 1860 and Kennedy in 1960. They were both succeeded by men named Johnson, Andrew Johnson and Lyndon B. Johnson, born 100 years apart as well. Both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday while sitting beside their wives. A long list of other claimed parallels, matching secretary names, matching assassin letter counts, has circulated for decades, but many of those specific details don't hold up under closer historical scrutiny and should be treated with real skepticism. Strip away the shaky claims, and what remains is still an oddly precise set of dates and family names lining up a full century apart. Compare it to flipping a coin the same way twice in a row, except the coin is an entire nation's political history. Even the trimmed-down, fact-checked version of this story is strange enough to keep historians debating exactly how much of it means anything at all. Number 2. In 1650, an Italian astronomer named Giovanni Cassini calculated the distance from Earth to the Sun using the best mathematical tools available at the time, a monumental task given the technology of the era. His estimate landed within a reasonable range of the true distance, an impressive result for hand calculations done centuries before modern instruments existed. What's stranger is how many separate scientific traditions, working independently across different centuries and different countries, kept arriving at eerily similar figures using completely different methods. Some historians studying the pattern have suggested it points less to coincidence and more to a repeated convergence of mathematical logic itself, different paths accidentally leading to the same destination. Compare it to several different students, working alone in separate rooms with no communication, all arriving at the same unlikely answer through completely different equations. It raises an odd question about coincidence itself. At what point does an unlikely repeated pattern stop looking accidental and start looking like the universe simply doesn't have that many ways to be measured correctly? Number 1. Every coincidence on this list shares one quiet, uncomfortable trait. Each one only becomes remarkable in hindsight, after the ending is already known. Nobody in 1898 thought Morgan Robertson had written Prophecy. Nobody in 1835 thought Twain's joke about a comet was anything more than a joke. It's only once the second half of the story arrives, the sinking ship, the death, the repeated date, that the earlier half suddenly looks engineered rather than random. Researchers studying coincidence and memory have long pointed out that human brains are exceptionally good at spotting patterns after the fact, even when the original events were entirely unconnected. That doesn't make these stories less strange to sit with. It just means the strangeness might live more in how we remember events than in the events themselves. Compare it to noticing a stranger's face only after you've been told they resemble someone specific, when in truth, you'd never have looked twice without the hint. Maybe that's the real coincidence running under every story on this list. History doesn't repeat itself so much as we simply get very good at deciding after the fact that it did. That's 10 coincidences history still can't quite explain. If you like this, subscribe for more.